Finding players with low ownership and inexpensive salaries, it's crucial to your success on DraftKings. And that's why we're about to talk with SI fantasy and gambling analyst Michael Fabiano and Ben Heisler. Fabs, let me go to you first. Let's get to those bargain buys. Who do you have your eye on for week 16?
Well, clearly I am in the holiday spirit, and I am giving out great DFS bargains for Christmas. I'm going to start off with Baker Mayfield, who's been the touchdown maker over the last 4 games, 11 touchdowns during that time. He's giving you 20-plus fantasy points in 3 games, and now he's got the Jets. And forget about Jared Goff because he's not a good quarterback. The men in green have allowed 30 touchdown passes and the third most fantasy points to quarterbacks, so I'm going with Baker Mayfield at $6,100. And then let's go to LA and Darrell Henderson, who likely will draw the start with Cam Akers out. That's a tough loss in redrafts. But Henderson is a guy who I feel like at $4,500 is a nice, cheap, inexpensive play who could end up putting up some good numbers. Seattle has allowed 16 touchdowns and the 10th most fantasy points to running backs. They've also allowed 14-plus fantasy points to running backs 10 times this year. And at tight end, let's go with a little Cleveland Browns stack, right? I like Baker Mayfield. I also like Austin Hooper. He's coming off his best game of the season, had a touchdown and over 15 fantasy points against the other team in New York, the Giants. Now he gets the Jets, Jets. And their defense has allowed the most fantasy points to tight ends. In fact, 3 tight ends have scored over 24 fantasy points against the men in green. So if you're into the stacks, you can go Baker and you can go Hooper, and hopefully you'll get a little holiday gift this weekend.
I need that Fabiano Jets thing on a loop at all times. Let's get working on that. In the meantime, let's go to Ben for your low ownership players. Who's not going to be heavily owned or a popular play in week 16?
Yeah, if Fabiano's giving out gifts, and I suppose I might be Scrooge because I'm going with the guy that he just crushed. Jared Goff is $5,900, and I was one of the people that he screwed over last week when I had the Rams in my survivor pick. But this is a better opportunity. And let's think about it, too. Jared Goff has been substantially better on the road this year than at home, and he heads to Seattle, where on the road, Goff has 14 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and averaging 311 passing yards. That's almost 91 yards more on the road than compared to at home. He faces a Seattle defense that is still improving over the last handful of games, but they're still bottom 4 in DraftKings points allowed to the position. So it might have taken a loss at home to the Jets and a lot of survivors pools busted. But I will be considering Jared Goff with very low ownership because no one's going to want to play him this week in an opportunistic matchup. At the running back spot, Miles Sanders going up against Fabiano's Dallas Cowboys. He's $7,000. And the thing is, since Jalen Hurts took over, he's been the main story, but it's also allowed so many more avenues for Miles Sanders. He's rushed 31 times for 179 yards over the last 2 weeks. Even more importantly, he's had 8 red zone attempts, 4 in each of the last 2 games. In the previous 4 games for Miles Sanders, he had a total of 7 rushing attempts in the red zone, and the Cowboys are giving up the 7th most DraftKings points at the position this year. Lastly, Amari Cooper at $5,700 for his Dallas Cowboys going up against the Eagles. Up until last week, Amari Cooper had scored in 4 consecutive games. He was the go-to target for Andy Dalton in the red zone. Did not happen last week. One of the worst games that Cooper had played last year, but I think it's an opportunity to bounce back against an Eagles defense that has struggled all throughout the season at stopping number 1 wide receivers. They got torched last week by Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins. Last week for Hopkins, on 11 targets, he had 9 receptions for 169 yards and a touchdown, and he's $2,200 more than Amari Cooper. I think this is a good opportunity to go back, and especially at a $5,700 price point, you can go ahead and load on a couple of studs at the running back spot this week.
Sports Illustrated has you covered for all of your DFS strategy and advice in week 16. Go over to si.com/gambling to check out all our great content.